Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. Today I'm going over the buy list for Team Up, the new expansion. Pre-releases are starting next week, so it's good to have these in mind, know what to start trading for, know what to look out for as the cards start coming onto the shelves and onto the online websites and that stuff. What do we need to buy in order to perform at the highest level with this new set? So, first of all, the core essentials. I'll let you take it all in right now. I'll go over a few bits and why I've put counts at where I've put them. But essentially, I've got 3 slides here. I'm going for the core essentials, this slide, which is going to be, you know, the cards that you will definitely want to get. They'll be top tier contenders, you know, at least tier 2 contenders, or they have crucial potential as tech cards that you want to have access to in your binder. So, starting on the far left, I like to be quite conservative with my supporter and trainer cards, knowing that, you know, they could end up being that, like, extra supporter that you just want in a list here and there. So I've put Bill's Analysis at a 2 count. Nanu as a 2 count. I think he'll never be more than that. Jasmine, probably a 2 count as well, just for metal decks, for Lele searchability. 2 copies of Brock as well. I mean, he never saw that much play, but I think even in the sort of Lucamine decks that want to use Brock, he'll only ever be a 2 count. And then 4 of copies of Ingo and Emmett and Erica's Hospitality, both potentially powerful draw supporters in our format. I think Erica's a definite 4. Ingo and Emmett, I wouldn't hate you if you got less or just didn't get them at all, but I think they're worth grabbing onto just because that discard synergy is quite nice. Obviously, the Prism Stars, Black Market, and Wonder Lab, they're both highly valuable cards, I think, and they're really worth grabbing onto. Obviously, they're Prisms, just need 1 copy. Reedham Forest is really impressing me, and I'm putting it into more decks than I originally thought. I think that's a 3 of to get as well. 4 of Judge's Whistle, Pokemon Communication, if you don't have old ones. 3 of Dangerous Drill. I still rate this card personally. I think Zoro Weavile or Zoro Rock with a heavy Weavile will also just be very playable in the new set, thanks to the likes of Nano and Black Market. So I'm still believing in Dangerous Drill. I love its flexibility. And 4 of I think Muscle Pad, or it might be a different translation by the time it comes out in English. I think it's called like Buff or something as well. So these are some good tools to grab as well, because they just, although I haven't really put them in too much, maybe like a 1 of in Venusaur that I have at the moment, just because there's so many Pokemon that do hit that 4 retreat cost threshold, it's just like an instant include in those decks. So I think that's worth grabbing onto just for the future, really. For our tag teams, I think the 2 that I want to get the most is Pikachu Zekrom GX and Eevee Snorlax. Pikachu Zekrom is going to be the front man of his own, you know, potentially top tier archetype. And I think the Eevee Snorlax is also potentially included in Malamar, Gardevoir, Vika, just because it's all colorless. This guy's going to have huge potential throughout and could enter the format just as being good enough in a Malamar DCE based build. Then we have some wonderful one-offs on the top right of the screen. A couple more Prism Star cards. The Shaman is very good for Rayquaza decks. The Tapu Koko Prism Star, also good for Rayquaza decks, but way better for everything else as well. Awesome in Zapdos decks and Pikachu Zekrom decks. Could also be an accelerator for, again, just some colorless attackers. Like even Aerodactyl could use this with a Volkner engine. So I think this card is just probably the best card in the set, to be honest. That Koko Prism Star alongside like the Jirachi. Some other great one-offs. I think the Mr. Mime is a great tech card to pick up, just stopping Acerolas when you need to, if the meta is going to be based around some, you know, tanking decks or heavy Zoroark using Acerola. The Absol is a great tech card for Zapdos and other decks relying on a Jirachi engine. Also could be good for stall decks. 1 copy of Bisharp, I think he's good enough just if you are playing some unit energies. It could be a good counter card to the likes of Gardevoir or a lower Ninetales GX, and I think he might just be a Ditto evolution, so I wouldn't even look at getting the pre-evos of the Pawniard and Bisharp. Quick note though, if you do really believe in this card, you could increase the count and go to like 3 or 4 Bisharp and 4 Pawniard as well. 1 copy of Persian, I again think it's just a wonderful one-of that you're going to have with Ditto Prism Star. Again, it's nice for anti-mill decks. You can break their Lucamine chain. It's also quite good potentially in some mill decks for, you know, removing key pieces from people's hands. 1 Zebstrika, I like it in some of the Zapdos builds if you do want to have that sprint as a backup to get around Muck. I think that's reasonable. On our channel, I had a list with 1 Zebstrika. I've been trying lots of Zapdos lists though, and I don't think you ever need more than 1 copy of that guy. And I think the previous Blitzel is the better one, although we do get one in this set that has 60 hit points. You're never going to use a Elm Engine in a Zapdos deck, so you just want the 70 hit point Blitzel that we already have access to. 3 copies of Zapdos, I think it's incredible. It'll be in the Pikachu Zekrom deck, and it'll be the frontman of his own archetype. From the Japanese list I saw, they very rarely, if ever, had 4 copies, so I think 3 is going to be enough. 4 copies of Jirachi, frontman of the Zapdos deck, frontman of Tool Drop, frontman of all sorts of other decks, and has potential, you know, throughout its career. It's going to be the frontman of so many different archetypes. It's an amazing lead, and it's going to be a must 4 of copies, in my opinion. I think for other non-GX decks outside of Zapdos, the one that screams the most potential for me is Tool Drop. So I'm saying get a 4/4 of the new Honedge and Doublade. I think this has the most potential of the non-GX decks that I've looked at from this set, so I think this is worth picking up. And I also think the Pidgeotto line for that consistency is again worth picking up, similar to picking up like Zeb Strikers or Octilleries or anything like that. You just want them in the binder to have the option for them, especially if you're playing Elm-based builds. This is going to be nice, so I like a 3/3. I think, unlike Zoroark, the Pidgeotto obviously is never going to attack, so you're never going to want a 4/4, but I think a 3/3 will be plenty. On to the Believer buy list. So I think once you've got that core sorted, if there's anything else that catches your eye on this slide, you can go ahead and pick those up as well. I think these are definitely not mandatory, but if any of them are, again, in your opinion, worth picking up, you can definitely go for it, and I'm not going to bite your head off. If you're someone who likes to have a binder full of everything and wants to play fun stuff at League and at challenges and cups and stuff and want to be different and experiment, this is the slide for you. I think I've been a little bit more harsh on these item cards here. These are basically the only other ones in the set that have anything worth noting. The electric charges, if you're trying to play a full non-GX Zapdos build and just want to spam electric charger, or if you have some other lightning deck in mind, maybe like a Coco spread deck that's just using heavy electro charger, electro power. The metal goggles, if you expect them to be better than metal frying pans, I currently don't think that, but if Decidueye or other spread decks like remain more viable, it might be worth putting some money into those, and a couple of the Ultra Beast Fairy Charms if you really want to. I mean, so far Fairy Charm has been completely useless, although Ultra Beast 1 admittedly is quite versatile and powerful. I think both Buzzwole and Bucephalon seem a lot worse once this set drops, so I think they're not that much of a priority to grab. I think there's a few other tag teams worth picking up as well. The Gengar Mimikyu isn't currently in any of my Malamar builds, but it could be experimental in Malamar, could also be experimental in a Garbodor deck, because that synergy is so cool. The Poltergeist and Trashalanche synergy make people play items to play around Poltergeist, and then they're into Trashalanche range is the idea. Celebi Venusaur, I think, does have a few hurdles to get over, but the quad build is powerful. The reason why I've put this in the Believer buy list is because you're committing to 4 tag teams. Unlike the Pikachu and the Eevee Snorlax, you only need to buy 2 of each. These are going to be the pricey cards of the set, the tag teams, I would imagine. So committing to 4 is a big commitment. That's why it's on this slide, but I do think it has good potential. I think the other GX to look out for is going to be that Lycanroc GX, simply because it's already, able to evolve from Rockruff, and we already have amazing Lycanrocs already in the set. That I can foresee this card being sort of introduced into Buzzrock or Zororock with a thicker Lycanroc line, and just having this option available. I think you only really need 2 copies. I don't think there's going to be a full-on 4 deck with this guy, and you're just going to be removing energies from the active. I don't think it's strong enough. Onto the bottom left, there's a couple, again, not really wonderful one-offs, more sort of wacky one-offs that you can think about getting. The Ninetales could be, again, a Ditto evolution for some sort of Bucephalon deck, or even a Flareon-based build if you are going to be playing Flareon GX and the Fiery Flints. There's the Mimikyu, which, might be reasonable if you're playing Unit Energies in a Zoroark deck. If you're already playing Counter Gain, could also be cool for Gardevoir builds. And the Cobalion, I think, is a one-of, just for that GX attack, could be nice. Seeing as though it's colorless, it's pretty reasonable to think about having this card. And then onto the top right, there's the sort of other non-GX decks which are coming out in this set. I think the Gyarados does have potential, but a very weird engine on his own. Notably, you don't want the Magikarps because we already have the better ones that can stop bench damage. The Nidoqueen, I think, has potential alongside a Swampert Meganium deck, or sort of on his own with Pidgeotos. I put the pre-evolutions in there because you will be needing those. 4 of Aerodactyl, potentially powerful attacker. You can see a list on the channel. I think 3 copies of the Dragon reprint of Alolan Executor is all you need. I think you'd always play 1 just for type coverage against the likes of Lycanrocs and like Lapras and Werelord and stuff like that. But 3 copies might be a way to change up the list to incorporate things like Lance or Mysterious Treasures. 2 copies of Aegislash. If you're already buying the tool drop pieces, you could attempt to have this guy with Memory Energy or with Shining Celebi in the back to give yourself a lot of tank ability. It's got 140 hit points and it reduces 40 damage done to it, so it's a real tank as a non-GX, which could be quite fun. 3 copies of Articuno. I think it's nice for Quagsire-based builds, and I think that's pretty cool. It is weak to Lightning, though, and that's always going to be the thing holding it back. That's why it's not on my core buy list. A couple copies of Alolan Muck. I think if you want to play, again, some sort of Garbodor variant, you'll play probably 1 of the Sun and Moon Alolan Muck, the Power of Alchemy, and then you might throw a couple of these in to accelerate your sort of win condition with Trash Avalanche. Then down to the bottom where we have all these interesting stage 2s. The Omastar and Kabutops, obviously we've already heard about the expanded ban of Maxi, so these are going to be way less desirable cards as they come out. I think in Standard they're much more niche. I think you might want to grab a couple Omastar just in case there's some sort of non-GX, maybe some sort of tag team that can sort of work on its own back, and then you have this sort of being built up slowly in the background just to try and add some disruption in there. And Kabutops, I think you're never really going to have a 4-2-4 thick line. I think if anything, it's going to be sort of sat in the active for some sort of Meganium Swampert build to deny people, again, some draw, and try and help you build up your own combo or protect it in the back. Maybe like a Rhyperior-based Meganium Swampert will have this guy just sat in the active, trying to slow the opponent down and stopping them Guzmering parts of your engine. That's pretty much where I foresee the card. I've put a couple copies of Beedrill. Now, I personally don't like this card much at all. I've seen a few people talk about it, and again, I think because a Meganium deck could just have this and a Rainbow Energy, you can clear off some big tag teams, which is interesting. And I think a Zoroark deck could also potentially have this, again, just for sort of clearing up a tag team or a stage 2 that a Zoroark deck can't normally deal with. I think overall the Beedrill's probably quite bad, but anything that could just go into Zoroark is worth picking up. And I think we already have a better Kakuna and Weedle, so you only need the Beedrills themselves. I think for the Blastoise, there's a 70 hit point Squirtle, which is probably worth picking up for sort of lower evolutions. This guy, again, can be an accelerator, which is pretty interesting. And I think although he's not strong right now, because we only have Magikarp Werelord really to power up, I think he has some potential in the future, because, you know, as more water Pokemon get released, he seems to be much more viable. I think we've also recently just heard about a Blastoise GX coming out in a future set. We obviously don't know what it does just yet, but hey, if you've got this guy as a background, you could start accelerating him straight away, which is pretty interesting. There's the Charizard, which I've also done a video on. I think there is the potential to have the 50 hit point Charmander, because if you play an Elm engine, you'll want this guy. Otherwise, we have the Burning Shadows Charmander, and we also have the Dragon Majesty Charmeleon, so I don't think you need any Charmeleons for this set. It would be just the Charizard that you got to pick up if you are a believer that he can just keep powering himself up with his own abilities and get big numbers. And finally, 2 copies of the Dragonite. If you're trying to make a Lance package work, he could be the guy trying to make it happen. Again, no pre-evolutions needed. Potentially, you might want to pick up just 2 Dratini again if you want to play like a Meganium-based build. But I was thinking more of a Lance thing for these Dragonites, personally. And finally, if you have your eye on Expanded, these are some cards that you may consider, even though they have no real place in Standard, in my opinion. The Magikarp Werelord I may be mistreating a little bit, because I've already put the Articuno and the Blastoise on the previous slide. I think if you're committing to buying Blastoise and Articuno, you might want to buy the Magikarp Werelords anyway. I don't think you need 4 copies unless you're in Expanded. That's why I put it here once again, because that price commitment is quite a lot, because they are promos, and you know, if you want to go out and buy the boxes you can, but it's a lot of commitment for you. The reason why I have 4 copies in the expanded buy list is because of the potential for this just to sit in the active and be a wall, overtaking its predecessor of just Werelord EX. I mean, potentially even a stalling deck will just play like 1 or 2 copies for that late game position where your opponent's already taken 4 prizes, and then you just put the Magikarp Warlord down, and then there's no downside for you, and it's just a bigger version of the other Warlord, which could be cool. There's also obviously the potential for this card being a 1 or 2 of in a Archie-Stoice build. 4 copies of Moltres. We have more energy acceleration for fire types in Expanded, therefore it discards cards at a faster rate. We've seen Durant do some stuff here and there as a weird, wacky rogue, and Moltres may end up being a similar case. 4 copies of Hitmonchan. Another weird, wacky rogue that we have seen recently is a Hitmon top Wobbuffet-based build. Hitmonchan is stronger than the Hitmon top. It has 10 more hit points. Its second attack is better as well, or at least more reliable than triple kick, so that's worth noting. And your opponent doesn't have to switch either, so it saves you the headache of having to Guzma stuff back into the active to 2-shot them. The Zoroark, I think, has much more potential in Expanded, where we have Battle Compressor and Dark Patch. It does good damage as well, where there's already synergy with things like Vespiquen and Flareon. There's the Hooper GX, which I think is pretty awful in Standard, but we do have, of course, Elixir and Dark Patch in Expanded, so I believe he could be the sort of new frontman of a Turbo Dark-based deck. His GX attack is really nice. You can knock out like a Shaman and also set up other things for your future turns for his 160 damage regular attack, which then has to like move out the active, but you'd never really care when you have Dark Cloak available to you. A couple copies of the new Yveltal may also be nice, again, for Expanded, just because we have the Yveltal break in Expanded, and this is a nice 1 energy and 2 energy attacker, whereas previously we just had Oblivion Wing and then nothing really in the middle ground. It was either you're just doing that 30 from Oblivion Wing, or you're doing the big break attacks. This one gives us a good sort of middle ground where we just do 60. 4 copies of Bronzor. I think I really like it in Expanded just because you have this text that you otherwise wouldn't have, and it potentially gives the deck a new breath of life and a new reason to play something like this over something like Eels or Malamar. A couple copies of the Latias tag team. I think because we have Double Dragon, its attack cost gets a lot less ugly and could be reasonable in some sort of Malamar-based build. And 4 copies of the hilarious Mimi Alolan Executor. Again, we have Double Dragon, we have Counter Energy, we have stuff like that to power him up way quicker, and of course we have the eggs that can recover themselves with propagation to keep spamming his attack to do huge numbers. That is going to be my buy list, guys, for the Team Up expansion. Let me know what you guys think. Are you going to be a believer? Are you just going to buy the core stuff? Do you like any of these cards in Expanded? Let me know down below. Hope you did enjoy this video and enjoy the pre-releases and starting to buy these cards and start playing with them. I'm really excited for it to come out and can't wait to start testing. So until next time, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.